Trevor, a 28-year-old delivery boy, is riding his bike in the hum of the New York streets when sudden rain and an injury throw him into the arms of the mysterious Dr. Elliot. One look in the waiting room and their worlds are turned upside down. But can a chance encounter turn into something more when Elliot's past hides a secret, and Trevor finds himself in the center of a dangerous intrigue? Love, risk, and unexpected twists and turns. It all started with rain. The rain came down in sheets over Brooklyn, turning the streets into a slick, shimmering maze. It was just past 8 p.m. on a Thursday, and Trevor Lynch, a 28-year-old bike courier with a sharp jawline and a sharper sense of humor, pedaled hard through the downpour. His last delivery of the night, a soggy bag of Thai takeout, hung from his handlebars as he dodged puddles and cursing taxis. The city buzzed with its usual chaos, horns blaring, neon signs flickering, the faint thrum of the subway beneath his wheels. Trevor loved this grind. It kept him moving, kept him free. But freedom came with a price, and tonight, that price was a slippery cobblestone corner on Flatbush Avenue. He didn't see it coming. 1 second, he was leaning into a turn. The next, his front wheel skidded, and he was airborne. The bike clattered to the ground, the takeout splattered across the pavement, and Trevor landed hard on his left wrist. Pain shot up his arm like a lightning bolt, sharp and electric. "Shit!" he muttered, rolling onto his back, rain pelting his face. He sat up, cradling his wrist, and glared at the wrecked delivery. Another tip down the drain. With a groan, he hauled himself up, retrieved his bike, and limped it toward the nearest shelter, a bodega awning 2 blocks away. But the throbbing in his wrist wouldn't quit. He knew this wasn't just a bruise. 10 minutes later, soaked to the bone and cursing his luck, Trevor rolled into the ER at downtown Brooklyn Medical Center. The waiting room smelled of antiseptic and wet coats, a fluorescent hum overhead casting harsh light on tired faces. He slumped into a plastic chair, dripping onto the linoleum, and filled out the intake form with his good hand. "Trevor Lynch. Wrist injury. Bike crash," he scrawled, then tossed the clipboard to the receptionist, a no-nonsense woman who barely glanced up from her screen. "Trevor Lynch?" A voice called after what felt like an eternity but was probably only 20 minutes. He looked up, and there he was, Elliot Reeves, a 35-year-old surgeon with dark, slightly tousled hair and eyes that seemed to see right through you. He stood in the doorway to the exam area, white coat unbuttoned over a navy scrub top, stethoscope slung around his neck like a badge of quiet authority. His voice was low, steady, with a trace of something warm beneath the professional edge. "Come with me." Trevor grabbed his soggy backpack and followed, wincing as he flexed his wrist. The exam room was small, sterile, white walls, a steel table, a tray of instruments glinting under the light. Elliot gestured to the table. "Hop up. Let's see what's going on." Trevor obeyed, sizing up the doctor as he did. Elliot was lean but solid, with a calm intensity that made the room feel smaller. He pulled on gloves with a snap, and Trevor couldn't help but notice the way his hands moved, precise, confident, almost graceful. "So, what happened?" Elliot asked, his tone neutral but his gaze sharp as he took Trevor's wrist, probing gently. Trevor hissed at the touch but managed a crooked grin. "Took a corner too fast in the rain. Bike said nope, and here I am." Elliot's lips twitched, just a flicker of a smile, but his focus stayed on the injury. "Courier life, huh? You guys are fearless." His fingers pressed along the bone, and Trevor gritted his teeth, a jolt of pain mixing with something else, a strange flutter in his chest. Was it the rain still buzzing in his veins, or the way Elliot's brow furrowed in concentration? "No fractures from what I can feel," Elliot said after a moment, stepping back. "But we'll need an X-ray to be sure. Just a sprain, most likely ice, rest, a brace. You'll live." He scribbled something on a chart, then met Trevor's eyes again. And there it was, a spark. Not just the clinical detachment of a doctor, but something deeper, unguarded, like a question hanging in the air. Trevor swallowed, suddenly aware of how close they were, the faint scent of Elliot's cologne cutting through the sterile haze. Thanks, Doc," Trevor said, voice rougher than he meant it to be. "Guess I owe you one." Elliot paused, pen hovering over the chart, then looked up with that same quiet intensity. "It's Elliot, not document. And you don't owe me anything, yet?" A beat passed, heavy with unspoken things, before he added, I'm off in an hour. There's a 24-hour pharmacy a few blocks over. I could show you where to get that brace if you're not in a rush. Trevor blinked, rain-soaked brain scrambling to catch up. Was this guy serious? A doctor offering to play tour guide? He should have said no. His wrist hurt, his bike was a mess, and he was drenched, but something in Elliot's steady gaze pinned him in place. Yeah, he heard himself say, a slow grin spreading. I can wait. Outside, the rain drummed on, relentless. Inside, the air between them crackled with a tension neither could name. Trevor didn't know it yet, but that fall on Flatbush Avenue had just tipped his life into something wilder than any delivery run, a collision of hearts about to unravel secrets, danger, and a love he never saw coming. The rain hadn't let up, a steady roar against the hospital windows as Trevor sat in the waiting room, his wrist throbbing in time with his pulse. His damp clothes clung to him, the chill seeping into his bones, but he barely noticed. His mind was stuck on Elliot, those steady hands, that low voice, the way his offer to hit the pharmacy had landed like a dare. An hour, he'd said. Trevor glanced at his phone, 9:15 p.m. 45 minutes to go. He could have bolted, grabbed his bike, found a brace on his own, called it a night. But something about Elliot's quiet intensity, that flicker of a smile, kept him rooted to the sticky plastic chair. He scrolled excitedly, half reading posts about the storm clogging Brooklyn's streets, half wondering what kind of guy offers to play guide after a shift. A surgeon, no less, someone who probably had better things to do than babysit a soggy courier. Trevor smirked, imagining the headlines, Hot Doc rescues klutz on 2 wheels. Then the doubt crept in. Maybe it was just pity. Or boredom. He shook it off, stretching his legs, wincing as his wrist protested. Whatever it was, he'd find out soon enough. At 10 o'clock sharp, Elliot emerged from the exam area, coat swapped for a black jacket, stethoscope gone. He looked different, less like a doctor, more like a guy you'd spot at a dimly lit bar, nursing a whiskey. Ready? He asked, voice cutting through the waiting room's hum. Trevor nodded, slinging his backpack over one shoulder, and followed him out into the night. The rain had eased to a drizzle, but the air hung heavy, streetlights smearing gold across wet pavement. They walked side by side, Trevor's bike limping along as he pushed it, tires hissing faintly. So you do this a lot? Trevor asked, breaking the quiet. Escort patients to pharmacies like some kinda ER superhero? Elliot chuckled, a low, rough sound that hit Trevor square in the chest. Not usually. But you looked like you'd get lost out here. Or drown. Trevor grinned, nudging him with an elbow. Hey, I'm tougher than I look. Been biking this city since I was 19. Rain's just a bonus. Elliot's eyes flicked to him, sharp and curious. 19, huh? What's that story? Trevor shrugged, dodging a puddle. Dropped out of college, needed cash. Found out I liked the rush. You. Elliot hesitated, hands sliding into his pockets. Med school. Residency. Landed here a year ago after a messy breakup in Boston. His tone dipped, a shadow crossing his face. Trevor caught it, the weight behind messy, but didn't push. Not yet. They turned onto a quieter street, the pharmacy's neon sign glowing ahead, when Elliot's phone buzzed. He pulled it out, glanced at the screen, and silenced it with a frown. Work? Trevor asked. Elliot shook his head, too quick. No. Just spam. But the tension in his jaw said otherwise. The drizzle picked up again, fat drops splattering their shoulders. Shit, Trevor muttered, scanning for cover. Elliot pointed to a corner diner, its windows fogged but lights still on. There. Beats getting soaked. They ducked inside, the bell jingling as they shook off the wet. The place was near empty, just a bored waitress wiping the counter and a jukebox crooning Sinatra in the corner. They slid into a booth, Trevor propping his bike against the wall. Coffee? Elliot offered, already signaling the waitress. Only if it's strong. Trevor shot back, earning another half-smile. 2 steaming mugs arrived, and the conversation flowed easier than Trevor expected. Elliot talked about late-night surgeries, the chaos of the ER, how he'd once stitched up a guy who'd fought a raccoon, and lost. Trevor countered with tales of dodging cabs, racing deadlines, the time he delivered a wedding cake in a hurricane. Laughter came quick, cutting through the diner's stale air, but Trevor couldn't shake the feeling Elliot was holding back. That phone call. That pause about Boston. He leaned forward, elbows on the table. So, this breakup. Bad enough to ditch a whole city? Elliot's mug froze halfway to his mouth. For a second, Trevor thought he'd crossed the line. Then Elliot set it down, eyes locking on his. Bad enough to need a fresh start. Guy was controlling. Lawyer type. Didn't take it well when I walked away. His voice was steady, but there was a crack in it, a hint of something raw. Trevor nodded, letting it sit. Sounds like a dick. Good riddance. Elliot's lips quirked, but his gaze darted to the window, like he was checking for ghosts. The rain hammered harder, trapping them there. Trevor sipped his coffee, warmth spreading through him, and decided to test the waters. You didn't have to do this, you know. Play Good Samaritan. What's your angle? Elliot met his eyes again, unflinching. No angle. Just felt right. You're not like most people who roll through my yard. Trevor's pulse kicked up. Yeah? How's that? Elliot leaned in, voice dropping. You've got a spark. Most don't. Before Trevor could respond, Elliot's phone buzzed again, this time a text. He glanced at it, and his face tightened. Everything okay? Trevor asked, casual but watching close. Elliot forced a nod, pocketing the phone. Yeah. Old baggage. Let's get that brace. They paid and stepped back into the storm, the moments slipping away. But as they walked, shoulders brushing, Trevor felt it, a pull, electric and undeniable. Elliot wasn't just a doctor with a kind streak. There was a story there, a shadow chasing him. And Trevor, against his better judgment, wanted in. The pharmacy's fluorescent glow cut through the drizzle as Trevor and Elliot stepped inside, shaking off the rain like a pair of wet dogs. It was past 10:30 p.m., and the place was a ghost town, just a yawning clerk behind the counter and shelves stocked with everything from cough syrup to orthopedic braces. Trevor's wrist ached, a dull pulse under his damp sleeve, but the buzz in his chest was louder. Elliot's words from the diner, "You've got a spark," looped in his head, stirring something he couldn't name. He grabbed a wrist brace from the aisle, flexing it with a grimace. "This'll do, right?" Elliot nodded, slipping into doctor mode. "Yeah. Wear it a week, ice it, no heroics on that bike. You'll be fine." His tone was clipped, distracted, eyes flicking to his phone again. Trevor caught it, the third time tonight. "You sure you're good, man? You're jumpier than me on a triple espresso run." Elliot forced a tight smile, shoving the phone deep in his pocket. "Just tired. Long shift." But the lie hung there, thin as the pharmacy's flickering lights. Trevor let it slide, for now, and paid for the brace, the clerk barely glancing up from his phone. Back outside, the rain had softened to a mist, the city humming low under a bruised sky. Trevor strapped the brace on, testing his grip, while Elliot lingered by the door, scanning the street. "You don't have to walk me back," Trevor said, half teasing. "I've survived Brooklyn nights before." Elliot's jaw tightened, then relaxed. "I'm headed that way anyway. Come on." They fell into step, Trevor pushing his bike, the silence thick with unspoken questions. He wanted to pry, about Boston, the breakup, those damn phone buzzes, but Elliot's hunched shoulders screamed back off. So he waited. Halfway to the hospital, Trevor's phone pinged. He fished it out, expecting a late delivery ping, but the screen showed an unknown number. "Stay away from Elliot Reeves. You don't know what he's done." His stomach dropped. He stopped dead, tires skidding on wet asphalt. "What the hell?" Elliot turned, brow furrowing. "What's up?" Trevor held out the phone, voice sharp. "You tell me. Someone's got a real hard-on for keeping me away from you." Elliot's face drained of color as he read it, hands curling into fists. "Shit," he muttered, dragging a hand through his damp hair. "I didn't think he'd." "Who?" Trevor snapped, adrenaline spiking. "What's going on, Elliot?" The surgeon hesitated, eyes darting like a trapped animal, then sighed, shoulders slumping. "Nolan Crow. My ex-lawyer from Boston. He's unhinged. I left him a year ago, and he's been hounding me ever since." Trevor's mind raced. "Hounding how?" "Texts. Threats? Elliot nodded, voice low. All of it. Blamed me for some screw-up at his firm, said I ruined him. I moved here to get away, but he's got connections. Finds me no matter where I go. Trevor stared, the pieces clicking. The phone buzzes. The jumpiness. And now he's after me? Why? Elliot's gaze dropped. Because he saw us tonight. Outside the hospital. He's possessive, crazy possessive. Probably thinks you're a threat. Trevor laughed, sharp and bitter. Great. I crashed my bike, sprained my wrist, and now I've got a stalker X on my ass. Perfect night. Elliot flinched, guilt etching his face. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to drag you into this. The apology hung there, raw and heavy. Trevor wanted to be pissed, should have been, but the look in Elliot's eyes, that mix of shame and fear, softened the edge. Forget it, he said, exhaling. But you owe me the full story. No more dodging. Elliot nodded, reluctant but resigned. Back at the diner, I downplayed it. Nolan didn't just take the breakup bad, he tried to tank my career. Faked a malpractice claim. I beat it, but it followed me. He's got money pull. When I left, he swore I'd regret it. Trevor's jaw clenched. Sounds like a real prince. So what's his play now? Elliot's voice dropped to a whisper. He'll dig. Find dirt on you, your job, your life. Twist it. He did it to a friend of mine once, got him fired, evicted. I thought he'd let it go, but... He trailed off, eyes scanning the shadows. Trevor followed his gaze, a chill creeping up his spine. The street was empty, but the weight of being watched pressed in. They reached the hospital lot where Trevor's bike had been stashed. He locked it up, mind spinning. So what? I just wait for this asshole to screw me over? Elliot shook his head, fierce. No. I'll handle it. I'll talk to him. Trevor cut him off. Talk? Guy sounds like he'd rather sue you than chat. Or worse. Elliot's silence confirmed it. Trevor rubbed his wrist, the brace stiff against his skin. Look, I'm not running scared. But you need to figure this out, fast. Elliot stepped closer, voice urgent. I will. I promise. Just be careful. If he texts again, tell me. Their eyes locked, the air crackling with more than just rain. Trevor felt it again, that pull, sharper now, laced with danger. Yeah, he said, throat tight. You too. Elliot lingered, like he wanted to say more, then turned and disappeared into the hospital's glow. Trevor stood there, mist settling on his shoulders, the text glowing in his mind. Nolan Crow wasn't just a ghost from Elliot's past, he was a storm closing in. And Trevor, whether he liked it or not, was caught in the eye. The next morning broke gray over Brooklyn, the kind of damp, heavy dawn that clung to everything. Trevor woke in his cramped Bushwick apartment, wrists stiff under the brace, head buzzing from last night. Nolan's text, "Stay away from Elliot Reeves," glowed like a warning flare in his memory. He rolled out of bed, wincing as he flexed his hand, and checked his phone. No new messages. Yet. The silence felt worse than the threat, like a predator circling just out of sight. He splashed water on his face, staring at his reflection in the cracked bathroom mirror. What the hell am I doing? He muttered. A sprained wrist and a hot doctor shouldn't mean signing up for some psycho ex's vendetta. But Elliot's face, those haunted eyes, that quiet plea, kept tugging at him. Trevor wasn't the type to run from a fight, not on his bike, not in life. He grabbed his jacket and headed out, the brace a bulky reminder of the mess he'd peddled into. First stop, the courier hub. His boss, a grizzled ex-trucker named Sal, barely looked up from his clipboard. You're off today, Lynch. Rest that wrist or you're no good to me. Trevor nodded, but his mind was elsewhere. He needed answers, about Nolan, about Elliot, about whatever this pull between them was becoming. By noon, he was outside the hospital, pacing the lot where his bike still sat. Elliot's shift wouldn't end for hours, but Trevor couldn't wait. He texted, "We need to talk. Now." Minutes later, Elliot replied, "Break in 20. Meet me out back." Trevor leaned against the wall, the cold brick grounding him as he watched orderlies and visitors shuffle past. When Elliot appeared, scrubs rumpled, a coffee in hand, he looked like he hadn't slept. You okay? He asked, voice rough. Trevor held up his phone. Your ex's fan club hasn't RSVP'd again, but I'm not waiting for round 2. What's the plan? Elliot's jaw tightened. I called him this morning. Told him to back off. Trevor snorted. And? What did Prince Charming say? Elliot's eyes darkened. He laughed. Said I'd pay double now that I've got someone new to drag down with me. Trevor's stomach twisted. So he's not just a creep, he's a psycho with a grudge. Great. Elliot set the coffee down, hands flexing like he wanted to hit something. I've got files, old emails, recordings. Prove he faked that malpractice claim. I kept them in case he came after me again. We could use them. Trevor raised an eyebrow. We? You're drafting me into this now? Elliot met his gaze, steady and fierce. Only if you're in. I won't let him touch you, Trevor. But I can't fight him alone. The words hit hard, part plea, part promise. Trevor should have walked away. Should have said not my circus, not my monkeys. But the thought of Nolan smirking while Elliot drowned in this mess lit a fire in him. Fine, he said, voice low. I'm in. But if this blows up, you're buying me coffee for life. They spent the next hour in Elliot's car, poring over a USB drive of evidence, Nolan's voice snarling threats, emails bribing a colleague to lie. It was damning, but risky. He's got pull, Elliot warned. Cops, lawyers, he'll twist this unless we go public first. Trevor grinned, reckless. Then we do. Leak it. Let the bastard squirm. Elliot hesitated, then nodded. Okay. But we need to be smart. One wrong move, and he'll bury us both. That night, fate moved faster than they could. Trevor was biking home through Bed-Stuy, the brace chafing, when a black SUV cut him off. He swerved, tires screeching, and hit the curb hard. 2 guys climbed out, big, leather jacket types with cold eyes. Lynch? One growled, cracking his knuckles. Trevor's heart slammed against his ribs. Who's asking? The guy smirked. A friend of a friend. Says you're sticking your nose where it don't belong. Before Trevor could bolt, the second thug lunged, shoving him against a wall. Pain flared in his wrist as he ducked a punch, adrenaline surging. Tell Nolan he's a shitty matchmaker, he spat, kicking the guy's shin and breaking free. He sprinted, lungs burning, until he hit a crowded avenue and lost them in the throng. Gasping, he dialed Elliot. Your ex just sent goons after me. I'm fine, but we're done playing nice. Elliot's voice cracked over the line. Where are you? I'm coming, no. Trevor cut in. Meet me at my place. We end this tonight. An hour later, Elliot showed up at Trevor's door, face pale but set. I'm so sorry. He started, but Trevor waved it off. Save it. We've got work to do. They uploaded the files to a burner account on X, tagging local reporters with a headline. Boston lawyer's dirty secrets. Elliot's hands shook as he hit send, but Trevor squeezed his shoulder. He swung first. We're just swinging back. The post went live, and within hours it was trending, retweets, screenshots, outrage spreading like wildfire. But Nolan wasn't done. A new text hit Trevor's phone. You'll regret this. Then Elliot's buzzed. Watch your back, Reeves. Trevor looked at Elliot, the air thick with defiance. He's scared, he said, grinning despite the bruise blooming on his cheek. Elliot's eyes burned, fierce and grateful. Yeah. And we're not. They stood close, the fight binding them tighter than ever. Nolan's shadow loomed, but for the first time, they weren't running. They were ready. The fallout hit like a Brooklyn rush hour, fast, loud, and messy. By morning, the X-post exposing Nolan Crow had blown up, racking up thousands of shares and catching the eye of every news outlet from Gothamist to the Post. Trevor woke to his phone buzzing off the hook, texts from coworkers, a missed call from Sal, even a DM from a reporter. He groaned, rolling over on his lumpy couch where he'd crashed after last night's showdown. His wrist throbbed under the brace, a purple bruise blooming on his cheek from the thug's shove, but he grinned anyway. They'd done it. Nolan was on the ropes. Elliot sat at Trevor's tiny kitchen table, hunched over a laptop, eyes bloodshot from no sleep. It's working, he said, voice hoarse. 3 stations picked it up. They're calling it a lawyer scandal. Someone's already digging into his firm. Trevor shuffled over, peering at the screen. A grainy photo of Nolan in a suit, looking pissed, flashed under a headline. Boston attorney accused of blackmail, fraud. Good, Trevor muttered, pouring coffee. Let him sweat. But the victory tasted bittersweet. Nolan's last text. Watch your back. Hung over them like a storm cloud that hadn't broken yet. By noon, the tide turned hard. A detective from the NYPD called Elliot, asking for a statement. The recordings and emails had sparked an investigation. Nolan's connections couldn't bury this one. Trevor watched Elliot pace the apartment, phone pressed to his ear, explaining the threats, the malpractice lie, the years of harassment. Yes, I've got backups, Elliot said, glancing at Trevor with a mix of relief and dread. I'll send everything. When he hung up, he sank into a chair, head in his hands. They're raiding his office tomorrow. It's over. Trevor slid him a mug. Then why do you look like someone died? Elliot's laugh was brittle. Because it's not just him. I went public, my name's out there too. The hospital's already asking questions. I might lose my job. Trevor's gut twisted. He'd pushed for this, egged Elliot on, and now the guy's career was collateral damage. Shit, man. I didn't. Elliot cut him off, eyes fierce. Don't. I chose this. You didn't make me hit send. I did it for us, for you. The words landed heavy, and Trevor felt that pull again, stronger now, tugging him across the room. He sat beside Elliot, their knees brushing. Then we'll figure it out. Together. Days blurred into a tense waiting game. Nolan went quiet, no texts, no goons, but the news churned. By week's end, the cops had him. Arrested on charges of blackmail, evidence tampering, and assault for hire, all tied back to those files. Trevor saw the mugshot on TV, Nolan's smug face finally cracked, and hooped, fist bumping the air. Elliot, beside him on the couch, managed a tired smile. Justice, he said softly. Trevor nudged him. Told you we'd swing back harder. The weight lifted, but not fully. Elliot's hospital put him on leave pending review, and Trevor's boss gave him hell for stirring drama. Still, they'd won. With Nolan locked up, they needed a reset. Trevor pitched the idea over cheap beers one night. Let's ditch this mess. Move to Queens, fresh start. I'll bike, you'll doctor somewhere new. Elliot raised an eyebrow. Queens? You hate the suburbs. Trevor grinned. Yeah, but I don't hate you. And it's close enough to keep my city fix. Elliot laughed, the first real one in days, and clinked his bottle against Trevor's. Deal. But you're not biking with that wrist yet. Trevor rolled his eyes. Yes, Dr. Buzzkill. A month later they'd done it, rented a shoebox apartment in Astoria, all exposed brick and creaky floors. Trevor was back on deliveries, dodging cabs with a lighter heart, while Elliot landed a gig at a small clinic, trading ER chaos for steady hours. One crisp evening, they walked along the East River, the skyline glittering across the water. Trevor's brace was gone, his wrist healed, but he still felt the phantom ache of that first night, the crash that brought them here. Crazy how it started, he said, hands in his pockets. One bad turn and boom, you. Elliot stopped, turning to face him. The wind ruffled his hair, and his eyes held that same quiet fire Trevor had seen in the ER. Best crash I ever cleaned up, he said, voice low. Trevor smirked, stepping closer. Sap. But he didn't pull away when Elliot's hand found his, fingers lacing tight. They stood there, city noise fading to a hum, the river lapping below. No promises were spoken, no grand vows or cheesy lines, just a look that said everything. They'd fought through shadows and won, not just against Nolan, but for this. Back home, they collapsed on their thrift store couch, legs tangled, a pizza box open between them. Trevor traced the bruise on his cheek, faded now, and glanced at Elliot. Worth it? He asked, half teasing. Elliot's hand slid to his, warm and sure. Every second. They kissed, slow and easy, the kind of kiss that felt like a beginning. Outside, Queens buzzed on, but in here, it was just them, two guys who'd stumbled into each other and built something real. Nolan's defeat was the win, but this, their messy, hard-earned peace, was the prize.